This video is a quick solution to quiz 6. In the first problem, we were asked to use VLOOKUP to find a value, or lookup based on a value, let's say, based on an ID, which must be our leftmost column. We're eventually going to look for institution, which will be our second column. You could include the title row in this problem. It wouldn't mess you up, and I give full credit for it, but it's much cleaner to just begin on the data portion. And then we want to pull the second column out of that. We could go ahead and pull additional columns. I think I saw every possible combination of columns and gave credit for all of them, as long as you pulled the second column. And then Excel asks us to use false to indicate an exact match, but after grading your papers, I realized we could also use 0 to get an exact match. Either one works fine, and returns the answer Norman campus of the University of Oklahoma. If you did not provide an exact match by a false or a 0, then you got OSU's campus, which I thought was a little bit poetic, but nothing I planned. I'm going to undo that so we get our false or our 0 back in there for VLOOKUP, and then move on to the next one. Here we want to solve the opposite problem. Given an institution, we'd like to find its ID. And so, of course, we can't use VLOOKUP. So we need to think about which column do we want our answer to come from. We'll use an index for that array, and of course that will be ID. And then we need to think about which column number do we want. And that will be where we can find a match to this file, this value in its list. And whether we start at the header or not doesn't matter, as long as we do it the same on both. So we'll capture that, comma 0 for an exact match. And we find that 131159 is the match for American University. Now, if you didn't ask for an exact match here, you could mess up in two ways. One is if there was no exact match on the list, then you'd just get the nearest match. So you really needed that 0 in there. And then two, if the list were not in alphabetical order, which was the case over here for ID was not in order, which is why we got the OSU problem instead of the OU answer. And same issue here. We need that 0 for an exact match. Okay, I think every single person got this one correct, and I think I saw about 45 different possibilities of which range of cells to select. I believe it's probably the cleanest to just do the data. I think I probably showed it both ways in class. But this is the array from which we'll be pulling our answer, and we will decide which row to pull based on where we find the institution. Now, if we started the index range, the blue range, a row higher on 27, then we'd want to start this match range a row higher on 27. Since we started on 28, I'll go ahead and start here on 28, and then say 0 for an exact match. And now we know which row to pull out of the blue array. We need to decide which column to pull out of the blue array, and that's based on matching this data field of city, in this case, across the possible column numbers. And I won't say much more about that because every single person got that one right. I was very proud of you guys. The pivot table, practically every single person got that right. Highlight it. My shortcut is Alt-D-P. You probably know another way to insert a pivot table. And since I'd asked for it on a new sheet, we already selected the range. We'll choose new sheet and finish. And essentially, for a list of cities, we just needed to pull city into row. Now, if we only want it where institutions are public, the best way to do that would be to filter it at the top of the table so it doesn't clutter up our table. Oops. How about control? So if we want public institutions, Now some of you pulled the control down into here and then filtered it only for public, and I accepted that because that still gave me a list that I could copy out and paste as a list. If you gave me anything that I couldn't copy and paste out as a list, I did not give full credit for that. I believe that brings us to number 5, where most people had a problem. The cleanest way, of course, to do this was double negative or. There was a pretty strong hint in there with the double negative, and there was also a strong hint with the word or, that are either public or are accredited by some institution. I was surprised how many people tried to type in these words, and many of you misspell them. It's always easier to apply that modeling rule to never use a value when a reference will work. So if we want to check and see if public is equal to control or accreditation agency is equal to column I. I'm going to do that first without the double negatives to remind you why we do them. The first time we do that, we get a false. If we make that negative, we get a true. And so, sorry, -1. If we make it negative again, then we get our +1. So if I copy that with a double negative, then we get the answer we're looking for. I also saw some other creative things in there. I think someone multiplied by 1 to turn it to a number, and that worked equally well. So also some people would put this portion in a cell over here, and this portion in a cell right here. And they're doing essentially the same math. So or this cell, comma this cell, does the same thing that we just did. I'll put that back to the double negative. So lots of different ways to get full credit on this problem. This takes up 3 columns, but arguably is a little bit easier to follow. So we'll copy that all the way down and see that our sum is 274. On the VLOOKUP, I was looking for 2 primary things there. One is the problem about inserting a column. So let's go back up to our VLOOKUP column. If I'm looking for column 2 here, and I insert a column, let's see what happens to my answer. It goes away because now column 2 in this red box is blank. So that is a huge pitfall with VLOOKUP, and most people got that, I think. And then the other one is I can't look up anything to the left, and that's why I had to use index match here. Try to solve that problem with VLOOKUP, and if you can do that without changing any of this stuff, let me know. I don't think we can, and that was the other big thing I was looking for. I did see a lot of eloquent answers that address things besides that, around things like only having to select one range and so forth, and I gave partial credit for that as well. But essentially 10 points for the column issue, 10 points for the left issue, and then 10 or perhaps more points for other issues that were pretty random. I took off 2 points for each spelling error on that. Please, when you do something like that, watch, I'll find a spelling error. If I hit F7, see, I put that in there for you guys, then it finds my spelling errors. If I do a problem on the exam with a spell where I require spelling, the only thing I'll do is hit F7 and find out words that you should have caught with F7. If F7 doesn't catch it, I won't count off for it either. I hope this video helps a little bit.